Right, today we're stepping firmly outside of the Peach Guitar's comfort zone. We're going to check out 3 of the very best value, high gain, compact amplifiers on the market. Let's delve in. Right, hello folks, Jack here from Peach Guitars. Today is a little bit different to the stuff we usually do, but I wanted to make a point of introducing some of what I think are the very best value amps on the market, at least valve amps. There's a clear distinction to make here. We all know about the incredible advancements of digital amps, modeling amps, and stuff like that that sit way below even the entry-level price points for valve amplifiers. But I've got 3 great, very good value amplifiers here today. All sit around 15 watts, and I'm purposefully going to keep the prices from you until the end of the video. So make sure you stick around to the end to find out just how good value these actually are. So I'm billing this as kind of like a high gain compact selection, but they're actually capable of considerably more tones than just that. So I'm going to show you 2 different tones from each amp, but I'm building it around the kind of the foundation of a great high gain tone, because that's what they all happen to be probably the best at. So they're all capable of other things, but high gain is where these amps kind of shine. So the 3 amps in the running, we've got the Marshall DSL 15H, we've got the EVH 5153 15 watt LBX 2. Catchy title, but we'll call it the EVH for now. And we've also got the Paul Reed Smith MT-15, which is the Mark Tremonti signature. So before I get into the specifics of each of these 3 amps, let me first tell you about the rest of the rig today. I decided to keep it as simple as possible because I want to kind of get across the point not only that these are really good value and they're cost effective, but that you really need very little else to get the very best out of them. So the only thing I've got on the floor is a Boss SD-1 50-odd pound overdrive, just for a little bit of a lead boost in the kind of traditional tube screamer, tightening up the low frequencies kind of a way. And in the effects loop of the amps that have effects loops, I've got a Boss DD3T, just for a little bit of atmosphere and to provide a little bit of space, because none of these amps have onboard reverb. And the guitar I'm playing is this very, very cool ESP LTD 87 series Eclipse NT. So it's obviously just a very cool T-style, really nice kind of well-matched guitar, I think, to all of these amps. It's got a pair of Seymour Duncan humbucking pickups with coil splittability here. Via the tone controls, so you can get a lot of different sounds just with this guitar. Like I say, 1 overdrive pedal as a boost, a delay in the loop, and just using the 2 different channels on each of the 3 amps. So let's take a closer look at each of the amps in today's list. Let's take a closer look at all 3 of these amps. I want to start with the Marshall. So this Marshall is the DSL 15H, and this is a distillation of the original JCM 2000 series that came out decades ago. It's been a really strong, really well-performing line for Marshall ever since. And the DSL range, the dual super lead is what it stands for, is now better fleshed out, and it's got way more options than ever before. The 15 is kind of where you start off, and I think in terms of valve amplifiers, the value that you get out of this for the money that it costs is just absolutely second to none. Like, there's so many features in this amp for the money, and it still manages to give you that very signature, very classic Marshall tone. The great thing about DSL though is that it pushes on, so you also, as well as having those vintage inspired tones, or classic as they call it in the form of the classic gain channel, you also get the ultra gain, so you get the option of having higher gain tones, which you're going to hear in the bulk of this video. The thing I like about this amp is that it's running 2 6v6s in the power section, and with 15 watts as well as a half power switch, you can get a nice range of power amp saturated tones. And for those who don't know what that means, it means you have the option of driving the actual overall volume of this amp while still controlling the level that it's putting out quite easily, and that means that you get the full Marshall character, because the best classic Marshall tones were always just came from cranking the amps really loud. So you have the option of doing that in a more reasonable way with 15 watts, as well as a lot of tone shaping. This amp, compared to anything else here, actually has the most number of tonal tweaks that you can apply to the sound, such as this deep switch, which I'm going to use when you hear the high gain clip. I've got this engaged. You've also got a mid shift here on this push-push control. That really just dips the mid-range out, makes it a bit more aggressive. For lower volume tones, I think that works really well because it gives the impression of sort of a bigger tone. You've then got a shared 4-band EQ, treble, middle, bass, and presence, individual volume and gain controls for each of the channels, and just a simple switch between them, the green and red channels. Now, the only thing this amplifier lacks compared to the other two is an effects loop. So I'm going to play with a Boss DD3T delay, and I'm using it in the front end of the amp. So if you do want to use time-based effects like delays and reverbs, just be aware of the fact you don't have an effects loop, but you can make it work quite nicely anyway. So the main tone you're going to hear is a high gain tone, but I'm using the classic gain channel as well with the gain all the way up. I'm not really trying to go for a really pristine, clean sound. Instead, I'm trying to get the best character that a Marshall amp has, which is that edge of breakup kind of sound. So when I'm playing the guitar quite hard and in the full humbucking mode, you do get a little bit of overdrive, but it's quite a nice, soft, kind of a vintagey kind of sound. And when I push it even further with a Boss SD-1 just for a boost, it actually turns into a really nice classic hard rock tone as well. Okay, amp number 2 is the EVH 5153, and it's the 15 watt, which they call the LBX. This is the second generation of it, and what that brings is a slight revision to the overall tone, a little bit of a tightening up compared to the original 15 watt, and very importantly, you've now got individual controls for the gain and the volume on both channels. Before it was shared, and it was really difficult to get a balance of the two tones. Now, EVH has established itself as a really well-known brand for their guitars as well as the amps. Started out with the big boy, the 5150 100 watt. That was a lot of numbers. 5150 100 watt. They then made a 50 watt, and most recently they made the 15. And what's great is they've managed to capture the same essence of tone all the way down to the 15 watt. It's still got that super aggressive. It's really well known as a modern metal amp. Loads of modern metal artists use the 5150 line of amps. So if that's your thing, if high gain is the priority and you want that maximum articulation and heightened aggression, this is the only amp that really excels at that in terms of having this really present mid-range. It really cuts, it's really tight sounding as well. And in the high gain clips, I'm using the gain literally about 9 o'clock on these black controls, which are the high gain channel. It's got so much gain, but even all the way down there, it's still really articulate. Some amps fall apart when you have the gain too low. This doesn't do that. This remains tight and articulate and fat sounding. Also, if compactability is key for you, this is by far the lightest, the smallest, the most compact, and the LBX, I'm guessing, stands for lunchbox. That's really, you know, of the original sort of teeny tiny amps like the orange Tiny Terrors and things, this is truest to that lineage. So if you want small, if you want compact, something to just grab and take to a gig, or something to just keep in the corner of your studio for when you need this blistering high gain tone, this is the most discreet, while still shouting, probably the loudest. Like everything else here, for 15 watts it's running a pair of power valves. In this case it's got EL84s. It's a little bit more of a mid-range focused Brit style voicing. It works really well with the amount of gain on tap to remain quite tight, and it means also that when you do crank the cleaner channel, it gets a little bit more compressed and a little bit more forgiving. So obviously for the high gain channel I'm using channel 2, but for the second channel I wanted to go for that kind of in-between sound, once again similar to the Marshall, going for that breakup tone. And the EL84s really help with that. They really smooth it out and give a bit of extra compression so it's not too buzzy and harsh. I'm using the gain about halfway on this white control here, you might just be able to see behind. And it works great when I boost it with the Boss SD-1 for a bit of a boost. It turns into that classic hard rock kind of tone that a lot of people are looking for, and it's really good on the volume control as well, so if you want to clean up, it can do that nicely. Now, in terms of features, this amp also starts to really pull away from the fairly bare bones Marshall. You've got an effects loop on board, which I'm using the Boss DD3T delay in as an always on thing. It's also got a resonance control which is on the back, which I've got set at about 1 o'clock, so that controls the overall sort of low frequency push of the amp in the power section. You've got foot switch for the two channels, you've got one speaker output, and as opposed to a half power switch, you've got a quarter power switch, which puts this at about 3 or 4 watts. So if you want this as a bedroom amp, you've got even more control over the overall volume and even more capability to drive this for all it's worth while keeping the volume low. I will also say, just subjectively, I think this amp probably looks the coolest because it's got such a great lineage and a history, not only with Eddie Van Halen himself, but just the number of artists that have taken on this amp brand ever since. It's a really iconic look, it's a really iconic sound, and it's really the only amp that I can think of for this money, at this power, that gives you that sound. Okay, so last amp of the three is the PRS MT-15, and I'm just going to say this is my favourite of the bunch. Now, I think there's a lot of things that are going for this amp that the other two just don't have, and they can be forgiven for that, because for years now, compact amps have all been about simplicity, just keeping it direct, going for the exact tone you want. If you want versatility, you typically have to look for a slightly higher powered and generally more expensive amplifier as well. But this is by far the most advanced and most grown up of the three. You can do an awful lot with this amp. It's not just a high gain amp. It's got an astonishing clean channel. And I think this is putting out considerably more than the 15 watts they say it is. I think this is getting on for 20 or 30 at least, just in terms of the way it feels as well. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that this amp runs 6L6s, which is a power tube that's often used in way more powerful amps. So you have that feeling of power, even though this is a low-powered amp, it really holds itself together. It's by far the most articulate and punchy of the three. Whereas the EVH kind of had this real sizzle and aggression to the tone, this just feels like it's perfectly in control. And even though it's kind of similar on the volume level output, it just feels very different. It does its job in a different way. Now, I think the other real thing that this excels at is the fact that you've got individual EQ controls for both channels. So you can see there's a lot more controls on the front of the amp anyway, but the lead channel has its own independent 3-band EQ as well as gain and level, and then the clean channel has exactly the same thing with a boost that you can pull out for the treble control. I think it's just an overall level lift. It doesn't really shift the tone at all. It's just really great for like a solo boost on the clean channel. You've also got global presence control, and then on the back is where you get a few of the extra features. You've got a half power switch, so you can run this at about 7.5 watts. An effects loop, once again, which sounds really nice. It's really transparent. It just eats up the Boss delay, so if you've got any effects you want to use in an effects loop, it's going to work great for that. So it's just the kind of the full package, and I think we've been spoiled with this amp in terms of the features that you're offered for a 15-watt amp. It does an awful lot of sounds, and just plugging it in straight away, I think this had the most authority. It sounded the most grown up, like I said. It might not be the thing you want. You might want that real on the edge of destruction kind of tone. This can kind of get there, but it's just a little bit more controlled. And if you're used to playing higher powered amps and higher gain amps, this is going to feel the most natural. It doesn't feel like you're making a compromise if you want a compact amp for your studio or to do small gigs with. Alright folks, now you've heard all three of the amplifiers, I'm very curious to know your thoughts, but I thought I'd do something a little bit different, break with Peach Guitar's tradition and actually offer you some of my own. To kind of rank these amps, I think it's pretty clear cut. They've all got individual strengths and they're all very good at particular things. But I've got to say the Marshall is the weakest of the three. Now given the fact that it's almost £200 less expensive than the other two, almost half the cost, I think it can be forgiven in a number of crucial ways. It's still got a really great feature set for the money. And the thing I think this excels at the best is giving you that pure Marshall tone. What Marshalls are best known for is kind of being pushed to the edge and having a little bit more of that rasp and sizzle to the sound that I personally really like. It's not for everybody, but if you're the kind of player that likes a little bit more of that amp on the edge of destruction kind of tone, this amp is very capable of that. It's a little bit more vintage in its nature, and for that I think it can be awarded a lot of character points for what it lacks in versatility and function. Second place I'm going to give to the EVH. Now this is a fantastic amp, and I do think that if you want that classic EVH bark and aggression and just full-on tone, there's no other way of getting it. It's the very best amp of its type for that, whether it be the 15 watt, the 50 or the full-blown 100 watt amp. It's just got a signature tone like nothing else. It's the best at that high gain, very aggressive thing. It does suffer a little bit with the cleans, but really I think if you're in the market for that amp, you're not really going to be that fussed about cleans. If you want versatility, look elsewhere, but if you want full-on distortion and really tight articulate tones, the EVH is by far the best, but it does just lose out on first place in my opinion because of the lack of variety of tones. Which means that the clear winner by some considerable margin in my opinion is the PRS MT-15. For a 15 watt amp, I think they've really just absolutely knocked it out of the park. I think this actually puts out considerably more than that because it's just so loud and so punchy, but it's really capable of a lot of different tones at a lot of different volume levels as well. And just given the full range of controls that you've got with all the different EQ options, as well as having full band EQ for each channel, you don't share any of it, as well as the other features like the half power switch and the fact that it runs full fat 6L6 power valves. There's really nothing to fault with this amp. The only thing I think is that it could maybe be a little bit smaller if, you know, compact is the goal that you want to achieve, but it's going to be absolutely perfect for anyone's studio setup or anyone's full live rig. Whatever you want to do, I think the PRS is more than capable, certainly of the other two, it's more capable of giving you pretty much everything you need for whatever guitar tone you desire. Okay, last thing I want to say is what I talked about at the start of this video, the pricing of these amps. Now I said that they're kind of a relatively affordable value. They're all way under £1,000, and I thought I wanted to save this till the end so that you're not kind of clouded with this judgment earlier on when you're actually hearing them. But the Marshall starts at around £300. It's certainly in that $300 to $350 kind of price bracket, which for a valve amp of any sort is great value. But the fact that it's a Marshall, it's got at least 2 different tones in there with 2 channels and a bunch of other tone shaping features. It makes it fantastic value. And I think you'd be hard pressed to find other amps, certainly at that price, that give you that much flexibility and that much kind of authenticity of valve classic tone. Now the other 2 amps, the EVH and the PRS, are both a little bit more expensive. They both sit around the £500 kind of price point, which is still just exceptional value. Even if you're just looking for an amp to do one thing, if you just want it for its high gain capability, it's great value for that. But if you're looking to use this as the actual centerpiece of your whole rig and utilize both channels and pull effects into the mix with the effects loops that both of these amps have, it's even greater value. Now, of course, value is subjective, and I'd like to know in the comments whether you think you're happy paying that kind of money for a valve amp. We've become very conditioned to spending an awful lot more than that and expecting all this kind of variety of tone and versatility out of our valve amps, and the fact that this is now way below the typical threshold that most people look to spend on a valve amp, I think it's pretty impressive. But let me know if you agree or disagree down below. There we are, folks. Thank you very much as always for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, please remember to leave a like down below, as well as drop a comment and let me know which of these 3 amps you think performs the best, whether you agree with my verdict or not. And if you're new here, make sure you subscribe to the channel as well so you don't miss out on any of the content that we put out similar to this and otherwise in the future. If you'd like more information about any of these 3 amps or any of the other products I've talked about in the video today, then make sure you click the link in the description below and head to peachguitars.com to do so. So thank you very much as always for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next video.